If you remember from roughly 2 months ago, I posted a video called Thanks Again Fairway to announce that the old HO layout that acted as the set of Fairway was coming down to make way for a new HO layout. Well, now said new HO layout is under construction, and I figured you guys would like to see how it's coming along. So, here is a part 1 of a series of videos on this layout's construction. Firstly, I'd like to talk about one of the reasons why I wanted to build a new layout altogether: operations. The old layout only had one full loop of track for continuous operations, and since my roster was increasing, it was starting to get frustrating to only be able to run one train at a time continuously. So one of the first things I knew I had to do when designing the new layout was to make it double tracked. Since I was also exploring narrow gauge with HO130/009, I also made sure to add a narrow gauge loop as well somewhere on the layout. The new layout actually wasn't that much bigger than the old one. The old layout was 5 foot by 8 foot, and the new one is 5.5 feet by 9 feet. In order to make sure I would be able to fit what I wanted on this new layout before buying anything, I actually used the same program that the unlucky Tug used to build his layout, Realmaler Pro, to design a track plan. What I came up with is a double track mainline, where the outer loop is 26-inch radius and the inner 24-inch. These wider turns allow for bigger locomotives like 484 Northerns and longer passenger cars to navigate the layout without derailing. I also managed to squeeze in something that I had wanted for ages: a roundhouse with a turntable. The brand I had in mind was Walthers, a pretty popular choice for HO modelers who want to add a roundhouse to their layout. I even managed to find a used roundhouse building at my local hobby store that was already pre-built and cheaper than buying a brand new kit, but it did not come with a turntable, so I will still have to seek one out soon. I also added a marshalling yard, a couple spurs for industries, and the aforementioned narrow gauge loop will go on this corner of the layout. The plan is to elevate it with scenery, similar to what the unlucky Tug did with its own narrow gauge loop, and the standard gauge trains will go under it through tunnels. I was quite pleased with this track plan. Though another hurdle I went through was the choice in track brand. My previous layouts used Kato Unitrack because I didn't like Atlas Snaptrack, but I decided to challenge myself this time and try out FlexTrack like most modelers use. I almost went with Atlas again for the brand choice, but I was talked out of it by my local hobby store's owner, as he told me that Pecco was much better in terms of quality. This is especially prevalent in their switches.
So for context on why I went with Pecco instead of Atlas, this is an Atlas, so it's an Atlas collection, and this is a Pecco. One of the biggest differences is the way they bend, so watch this. See it's by bending it, the Atlas track, and not this slice back to its original shape. Retains it, so they get a lot easier to hold the track.
I was also originally considering Code 83 track, but much like the unlucky Tug, I changed my mind and went with Code 100 for the same reasons he did. Despite it being less realistic, you know you'd need a magnifying glass to see the difference in size, the larger rails make it easier for models with large flanges to operate. Since I have some older models like a River Odyssey Big Boy and various UK engines, this would make life easier for them. With the track plan set in stone, I still need to build a table. Interestingly, I was recommended a special company called Benchwork, which specializes in pre-built benchwork for your layout so that you don't have to worry about breaking out your power saws and the like. I'll send a link to their channel in the description. Although it wasn't cheap, buying their benchwork made it a lot easier to get the table assembled. And if I ever move, this also will make it easier to take the table apart and put it back together again, since it was designed with the intent to be modular. If you notice in the track plan, it was split up into 5 sections, and this carried over to the layout itself once construction began. Once I got the plywood tabletop on, I actually just played around with trains for a little bit to get back in the groove with operations.
There we go. There goes Mallet past the roundhouse that will eventually become a part of the new layout.
But this didn't last long. My next stage was adding a foam top. Instead of buying new foam, I actually just recycled the foam from the old layout and put it back together like a puzzle on top of the new layout. This saved both money and materials that would have otherwise gone in the trash.
Something I want to quickly place emphasis on anyone who's planning to build a Malra with foam is that there is a crucial difference between whether you want to use a knife like this drywall saw or whether or not you should get one of these hot wire foam cutters like this one for Wooden Seniors. And that's simply the fact that if you only use like a drywall saw or a steak knife, it'll produce an edge like that. And while this is good for making fake rock formations, it's not always good if you want a clean edge when they're lying right up alongside pieces of foam like here, since this is meant to be this layout is meant to be taken apart in sections. But that's what this hot wire foam cutter is really good for, because the hot wire cutter, you can produce edges like this because it's smooth. Another great advantage is that if you get a hot wire foam cutter, you can also use white foam like this, because if you use the steak knife or a drywall saw, it would make those awful, unrealistic looking beads and make a huge mess. But with the hot wire foam cutter, you can use white foam like this. So yeah, those are some advantages of buying one of these.
I use great stuff to fill in the gaps as well, since not every piece lined up evenly. And that's currently where the new layout is at right now. I've begun laying track at last, but that's also going to be a process, but I do want to take my time with this layout to ensure that it'll be good. So until next time, I hope you've enjoyed the progress so far.